Hello, everybody. I'm Kevin Hydes, the chairman and founder of Integral Group. I think hopefully those listening to this broadcast are friends. I know that many of my colleagues over the years, proud members of the Institute, so hopefully you're enjoying the activities. Yeah, I mean, I was asked by the Institute to put a presentation together, maybe looking at the, historically, some of the things we've been doing together within Canada on the green building front, and over time, how's that changed? What are the trends that we're seeing from the past and where we're going in the future? So that's what I'd like to talk to you and share with you today while you're all together on this live event. For me personally, it really all began on this project. I was already mid-career by then, living and working in Vancouver, doing lots of interesting work. And then in the mid-90s, we were really fortunate to get involved with the CKHI building. Just an array of leaders, Eva Matsuzaki, Kiyoshi Matsuzaki, Bob Berkebile came in from Kansas City to help the early SHIRAP work, RAIC, pushing all sorts of levels of sustainable thinking on campus through his program, Frida Pagani, Joanne Perdue, now with the University of Calgary. I mean, the list is endless. Jeanette Frost, one of my colleagues at the time. And we really paved the way for our own careers to sort of explore and discover, some of the boundaries and perhaps limitations of sustainability then, and how it would help us as we went forward. So very much a defining project for me, and I think for anybody that was involved with it over 20 years ago now, but there's still interest in learning from this project. And certainly from my point of view, I don't think I'm having this conversation with any of you without this project. Wonderful, passive, off the grid set of ideas packaged together in a building, largely reusing existing materials, well before the LEED standard and other standards really emerged. So we were really defining what went into those standards before they even existed. It was a proud project within Canada, and that's definitely a case of Canada leading the world. I remember this project was exhibited at the International Green Building Challenge that RAIC and others helped organize back in those days, and a real ability to share a learning experience, and continues to this day. A number of years later, I started to move into the US to practice. Actually, the Packard Foundation project that took me there originally worked on with BNI, but with Bob again and Jason McLennan. And in the first version of the Packard Foundation, we defined through the Packard matrix, what we thought a living building was. A number of years later, the building was completed with a complete separate design team. Our firm was fortunate to be involved with it early on in our journey at Integral Group. Really took the living building ideas that we talked about earlier, took the best of the best from projects which at that time had already been designed and built, and really focused on taking best practice as far as we could in Northern California. Throughout the building of our firm, we've been really fortunate to deal with firsts. This is a project in San Diego. We worked with CGF, the architects. The Packard Foundation previously was with the HDD, a great firm in San Francisco that we enjoy doing wonderful projects with. Craig Venter Institute was the opportunity to actually design, build the first ever net zero energy lab, which I think it was a huge achievement at the time. Still continues to be a project we're learning from. More recently, I think in the present, when I look at the work around our firm, I'm sort of amazed at all the things that teams everywhere are starting to look at and pursue. This is a community center just outside Vancouver. You might be familiar with it. Probably some people in the audience were involved with this project. The architects, the structural engineers, contractors, and obviously our own team. designed to a passive house standard and really high performance building. What has kind of amazed us as we hit the extreme temperatures last year in Vancouver, just how well this building performed under climate disaster. So as we speak, we're trying to actually dig in more deeply to understand why does this building work so good, and how can we replicate it on a broader scale. So again, buildings that we learn from. You know, and you know, we do look at trends all the time. As an industry, obviously, as a profession, within our firm in particular, we're always trying to, you know, look what's shifting, what's changing, and what's the same. You know, and are we going back to the future with some of our thoughts, or are we really pioneering new ground and combination of the two? One thing that in our own work has been really important is our internal impact awards, integral impact awards. Almost a decade now we've been doing this. You know, we're looking at submissions from around the firm, and we're trying to categorize the work in our own values and our own principles. Imagine, perform, accelerate, sustain, and trust, nurture, inspire. And each year we get 50 plus submissions from around the firm, and we, you know, look at the work, we consider the work, we bring in outside juries to offer their opinions, and we offer awards year after year. What's been a trend that I've noticed within our own internal work is we're seeing lots of examples of great building projects. I mean, we're still an engineering firm that designs, builds, and then continuously improves buildings. But the blend of work has really brought in a lot more studies or reports or building codes or energy codes or standards for clients on a building by building basis, or a portfolio, a province, a city, a country even. So the blend of the work now has definitely moved into some of this focused study work that can influence all of our buildings, the ones that we design and work on, but more importantly, the industry at large. So it's definitely a trend that we've been seeing, and I think we see this in practice everywhere. I think most architects I work with do have their own teams that are breaking down the work into design and practice, and then these deeper studies. So I think that's a trend we're seeing everywhere as practices thirsty for new information, knowledge, and the next frontier. As an overarching trend that we've seen in our own, you know, like impact program is this shift, as I mentioned earlier, from building only type thinking to really studying deeper the buildings and sets of buildings, communities, etc. But also, I think it's important to blend these two left and right sides of the brain, the intuitive thinking that really gets at the heart of strategies for buildings from the beginning, but then increasingly backed by hard data, by science-based information, and just really knowing that we need both these techniques and these processes, in fact, between what's possible and what really works. So there's a collision of those two that we see occurring right now, particularly as we go forward. As I mentioned, our firm's built itself around these 4 pillars, we call them imagine, so we're constantly asking ourselves what's possible, and what can we do differently, or what should we do differently? We're, the other end of the bookshelf, the far end is perform, do the buildings that we're imagining and designing and documenting and building and commissioning and operating, do they really perform? And again, this requirement for a real focus on continuous feedback and continuous improvement. And then our other 2 pillars, accelerate, where we do the things, as I mentioned earlier, energy policy, building codes, standards, for clients, public and private alike. And last but not least, sustain. Our sustainable pillar is really focused on not just sustainability as we probably imagine it ourselves, but what does a sustainable practice look like over time, and how does it need to continue to morph and shape and grow? So these are the pillars that we think about when we do the work. impact awards that I referred to a few slides ago, this year's winners chosen by the external jury were kind of interesting. And now we've moved obviously from energy efficiency to zero net energy in projects like Packard Foundation and Venture. And obviously the conversation now is about net zero carbon. Interesting project here that we saw internally from the UK, our London office. The judges like this particular project because it looks like most of the buildings or schools or community centres you would see in these neighbourhoods, but it's operating at a net zero carbon standard at the same budget that the school district can afford. So we're moving into an era where we need this on a repeat basis, project after project, almost without no fanfare. A different piece of work, I think it's important for us to do this within our firm, and I think with all members of the RAIC, I think build these bridges, to the manufacturing sector. In this case, we working with a design build contractor that makes a precast product in the US, and we're helping them develop and sell an integrated precast system that's got embedded pipes for heating and cooling, and doing technical studies with this particular manufacturer, Clark Pacific, to really understand all the benefits that come from taking this approach on, low impact, high performance precast structures that can be rapidly deployed, operating at really high performance. And as we move towards this all electric agenda, which we're seeing everywhere, what are the attributes and what are the full carbon implications, not just on operating, but on embodied and whole life carbon thinking. Back to Clayton in Vancouver, that this also was thought by the jury this year to be an excellent example of how we need to be thinking about these buildings in our community and how they need to be places of refuge in a heating planet. I think this week, most of the news that we're reading is talking about how we missed the opportunity to keep the temperature increase below 1.5 degrees Celsius, and increasing evidence that maybe that's going to be difficult. So these are real issues that face every project we work on, no matter which community, city, province, country we work in. I think it's important to really think carefully about how we transfer the knowledge. Again, within our firm, we're really focused on this so that, if we discover something's really good on a particular project in a particular region, why not find a way to transfer that knowledge and use it effectively, adapt it as required in a bioclimatic, sensible way, but transferring the essence of the idea in a way that we can help projects everywhere. As we're looking forward, where there seems to be some key agendas that are in front of us. Obviously, the ongoing climate meetings. Last year in November, it was in Glasgow. The next 2 years, interesting if it's going to be in the Middle East, being Cairo and then the Emirates. And I think it's important to note this because that part of the world is a growing population, a large population, significant challenges in sustainable outcomes in that region. So I'm hoping that conversations that we see in here and contribute to in 6 months' time at this point are looking at all climates, not just the ones that we live in ourselves. There's a big agenda developing, not just talking about the buildings themselves, but the spaces between buildings, the communities, the horizontal aspects, the transportation, all the things that occur between buildings and how do they influence and interact. Electrification, almost everywhere we've seen rapid shift towards electrification from fossil fuel ways of heating and cooling buildings, massive decarbonization. Buildings need to be retrofit everywhere. We see in large clients moving to a portfolio thinking and really decarbonizing all their building stock. We need new tools, lots are out there, but many more needed. And of course, embodied carbon, needs to be thought about on all projects and all aspects of embodied carbon, not just the concrete and architectural finishes. We're definitely pioneering the understanding around the embodied carbon of MEP systems, which is significant, particularly if we're renovating our buildings. It becomes the dominant portion. You know, the social agenda, environmental justice agenda, and you know how people and workspaces interact overall, and lots of lessons learned from the past 2 years of COVID. So these are the big trends. I mean, for those who are involved with conversations around climate change gatherings, we can find ways to get your voice heard in the next 2 COPs particularly. I think there'll be really important meetings. The Beyond Buildings, the World Green Building Council, we were primary sponsors and principal authors of their Beyond Building report, which was issued at COP26 in Glasgow. Again, really with a focus on these key elements, but in all aspects of the built environment. I think big mega trend going forward. The electrification agenda mentioned. And I would like to point out that we're all doing this. We're all moving to this all-electric future. Most of our clients are. There is a big implication on the grid, and I'm sure you're aware of it. But in some countries, many countries, I mean, we're really talking about almost a doubling of the generation, going from fossil to renewables, but needing much more of it, given that our transportation is becoming all electric, not just our buildings. The rapid decarbonization, it's a study we did in Washington, D.C. a couple of years ago now, but really identifying quickly which buildings need to be tackled first, which are the real polluters, and how do we get to them and get the funding needed and do those retrofits quickly, rapidly, in a sensible fashion. Same applies to all buildings, and this is public and private alike. But I think every firm that you work with and work for or lead, needs to be thinking about having an existing buildings team or unit, because this is a great challenge to really retrofit our existing buildings, and we need specialists that can understand it, do it, and repeat it rapidly. Our clients who have large portfolios have all moved to their own ESG agendas at this point. They've made commitments to rapidly bring down their carbon emissions through their building portfolios. Their tenants are looking for it, their clients are looking for it. So the whole supply chain now is shifting towards this decarbonization, but at a portfolio scale, which could be very powerful, needs to be really powerful to get to where we need to get to. I mentioned tools. I think all shapes and sizes of tools are needed. We have people in our firm that are coming from some of the top schools with PhDs who are trying to develop tools, machine learning and AI techniques to again replicate more rapidly how we can assess, analyze, and modify these buildings, either existing or new. We need faster tools. We need cheaper tools. We need lots of them. And I know many of you out there are developing tools with others in the market. So that's a big need. We've moved from operational carbon and energy. Last decade has been a lot of studies and good work on embodied carbon. I think now we need to put the two together and really think about the whole life carbon. It's going to change some of the decisions that we make, in our world. Maybe we're going to move from big pipes and small pumps to small pipes and big pumps, because when we look at the whole life consequences, that might actually be a better strategy. Again, not always, and we're certainly not turning our backs on energy efficiency. And again, these whole life carbon tools, integrating this data into the tools we're already using to design our buildings. You're familiar with these. We need help from all areas of the industry, to get these things built quickly, so we can do these assessments and make these better decisions faster. And this is not a research project. This is day-to-day practice that we're talking about with all architects, all engineers, as we're moving forward. and the people, and sort of addressing some of the wrongs of some of our decisions in our communities. Historically, bringing back to life neighborhoods that have been polluted and distressed, and giving everybody a fair chance at this new future, and through equitable distribution of funds and thinking, and changes in all of our communities. And again, through COVID, we've focused a lot on health. We've learned a lot in 2 years. We were already, looking at this topic, closely prior to that, but I think we had an acceleration in understanding air movement, air change, air distribution, materials, inside pollution, outside pollution, our increased fires and forest fires mean that, our buildings, we all love to design passive buildings. I do, I'm sure you all do. I think we need to think as well about mixed mode, modes of operation through times of high heat, high smoke externally, to keep those internal spaces healthy and productive. And, just last week I was with a couple of colleagues, and we were talking about this notion of we need to be building resilient hubs in our communities, and many already exist. Our libraries, our fire stations, our police stations, our community centers, our schools need to now take on a new challenge, which is to be the places of safe haven that we go to during climate risk and climate threat. So I think that's a whole new body of thinking that's emerging, and I think the ILFI Living Futures organizers might be picking up that ball as we speak and running with it. And last two images are showing me my favorite pastime these days is sailing. I think we can learn a lot from nature. I think when you're a sailor, you learn to respect nature in a completely different way, and you learn to be very mindful of all the threats that are out there, and really make all the adjustments possible to not only be safe, but to thrive. So I think hopefully some ideas in this presentation can be things that you're already thinking about, and you can think more deeply. But more than anything else, I'd just like all of us and everybody listening in today to find ways to act, and to act now. Thank you all.